Southwest Louisiana is not the Louisiana most people picture. It is not Bourbon Street. There aren't raw iron balconies or jazz drifting through the humid midnight air. Instead, this part of Louisiana is typically flat roads disappearing into marshlands, oil fields, crawfish ponds, weathered trailers, and ditches running beside highways. Places that everyone knows everyone and everyone knows secrets. The town of Jennings sits in Jeff Davis Parish, roughly halfway between Houston and New Orleans. A small community of only a few thousand people, quiet, working class, the kind of place where names carry history. And in the mid-2000s, that quiet town would become the center of one of Louisiana's most disturbing mysteries. I am your host, Hatter, along with
Scoot,
and welcome to Investigation. I realized that in my German Coast Uprising, like the second part, there were so many times that I would be like the planters when I meant to say like the planter, or like plantation when I had it was supposed to be plural. I wasn't pluraling words when they were supposed to be plural, and I was unpluraling words when they should have been plural. I don't know. I kept messing it up.
You got your point across.
I got my point across, but I realized that when I was editing, and I was like, I think I just had so much going on that week, because that was like when we found out we were about to lose the apartment and all of that, that like I was reading what I was trying to say, and like I was reading my notes fine, but like some of the words I didn't even catch that I fucked them up. So I apologize to our listeners for that, because this was just a lot. There's a lot going on. But it's okay. We rock and roll anyways. Today I'm going to talk about the Jennings 8 case.
Ooh. Oh no, she just starts off with, I know it's going to be a rough ride.
It is. It's very it's very complicated. It's very confusing at points. And it has to be two parts, because there's too much to fit into one part. And once again, it's another one that we don't really have an answer for, which is always frustrating. But Jennings itself is not exactly a wealthy town. It has a population of between 10,000 to 11,000. The local economy leans heavily on oil, agriculture, and service jobs. Like many small southern communities, Jennings existed through interconnected relationships where like family names mattered, who you knew mattered, and overall your reputation mattered. This town itself exceeded the U.S. poverty average with a rate around 19%, which does actually sit in line with much of Louisiana. And this is important because of the case we're talking about, and poverty itself does tend to significantly increase crime rates in an area. People are pushed to economic survival.
Yeah.
An article written by Northwest Career College says, quote, "When basic needs such as food, shelter, and health are not available, individuals may commit theft, drug trafficking, and other crimes just to get by the day and feed their relatives."
Yeah, I mean, if you look at it I've talked about several cases where stuff went on during the Great Depression where people went to extreme things.
Right.
I mean,
yeah, a lot of these cases we tend to talk about like sex work and things like that just because of how they line up. And my thing is like, even nowadays, when people are pushed to desperate survival, a lot of the times women turn to sex work and like men turn to drug trafficking.
Yeah.
And it sucks, but even nowadays it's happening. Like,
it
you
still
see
happens, yeah.
a ton of people doing that. Even the other day, when we were me and my boyfriend were talking about the apartment and things like that, and I was like, sometimes I sit here and I'm just like, I want to be a shittier person. Because, like, this is slightly off subject, but AI, right? People are creating like thousands of AI bands now. And so they just sit there with AI and they make these bands and then they post them and then they make so much money. And I'm like, I wish I didn't have the moral compass because I hate using AI.
Yeah.
But this also, like, that was off track, but my brain is a little chaotic right now. It's so much easier to be a quote unquote bad person because in a lot of ways it's more profitable than trying to work a regular job and getting screwed over.
Yeah.
And that's why I said quote unquote bad person, because they're really not, but you're doing what it takes to survive. And that's kind of the tone that we have here for the women that I'll be talking about.
All right.
A lot of them were involved in like drug trafficking, sex work, and things like that, but it does seem to be for survival.
Mm-hmm.
In Jennings itself, it had really high elevated crime rates compared to many similarly sized U.S. cities or towns. There was a combined violent and property crime estimate of 43 incidents for every 1,000 residents, with 1 in 23 residents being a victim of some type of crime. And violent crime sits at 1 for every 100 residents, according to an FBI analysis. So definitely just crime-heavy town.
Yeah.
In Jennings, it was often presented as methamphetamines, crack cocaine, and transactional sex.
Sounds familiar.
Right, what we were just kind of talking about. And by the early 2000s, addiction had embedded itself into the corners of the town. Though Now, because a lot of these women did struggle with substance abuse, like what we've talked about time and time again, this is also one of the reasons that the case failed to receive urgency early on, because society often makes these people invisible.
Which we've seen before in previous cases we've covered.
Exactly. Yep. So like I said, this case gets a little bit confusing, so I'm going to start with the victims. And as we move through, there's going to be a lot of interconnected names, so if you need a refresher, feel free to ask. I also might refer to the women as victim number 1 or victim number 2, and it's not to discredit them as being human beings who's lost their lives. It's just to ensure clarity as we go through.
As to who we're talking about.
Who we're talking about, exactly. Loretta Lynn Chasen Lewis is our first victim. Now, she was a white woman with brunette hair. She stood at only 5'4", and she was around 28 years old, being born on December 26, 1976. So she was the day after Christmas.
Yeah.
Which always I feel like kind of sucks for people being so close to Christmas.
Oh, yeah, no. Being born closer towards Christmas, or even some people born on Christmas, it's...
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've heard a lot of stories. But she grew up to marry Murphy Lewis and gave birth to 2 children. On May 17, 2005, Loretta disappeared. Now, she had known hardships like a lot of the women that I'm going to be talking about and would later be connected to the case. She moved through difficult circumstances involving addiction and instability, but her family remembers her as a devoted mother, a loving wife, and daughter. Her brother, Chad Chasen, stated that, quote, she was always about her kids. She always had a smile on her face and would never hurt anybody, end quote. Her body was discovered 3 days after her disappearance by fishermen west of Louisiana Highway. She was found floating in the East Fork of the Grand Marais Canal near a bridge on LA 1126. This was a few miles southwest of Jennings. It was reported that fisherman Jerry Jackson initially thought he was looking at a discarded mannequin because there had reportedly been news about stolen mannequins.
What?
Yeah, so
do we need to circle back to this at some point and talk about the case of stolen mannequins?
I said mannequin weird there, but so it was when he realized that there was flies around what he thought was a mannequin that he called 911.
Oh.
She was described as being in an advanced state of decomposition by the time she was recovered, which complicated identification and evidence collection.
Yeah.
And one source reports that she was recovered partially clothed but without shoes. After recovery, reports described her as wearing blue jeans, blue underwear, and a white short-sleeved shirt. Invisible external injury was limited, like they couldn't really see anything.
Okay.
Publicly, there was a statement saying that she had a small area of blood beneath her scalp. So I'm wondering if maybe it was some sort of like head trauma.
Like blunt force trauma.
Yeah, but it wasn't like anything super noticeable because even the cause of death was never determined, at least publicly. The people were never made aware of it.
Yeah.
There's a lot of weird things about this case.
Okay.
Official findings did point towards homicide at the time, though.
Which would make sense.
Right. Less than a month later came another death.
Sapient?
I don't even know what I said.
I don't even know what you said either.
I just had to, like, take a second and fucking reset. I need to, like, lock in my brain. The second victim that would eventually be linked with the Jennings 8 was Ernestine Marie Daniels Patterson. Now, she was born on September 11th, 1974, making her 30, almost 31 at the time of her death.
Mm-hmm.
She was also 5'4", but she was an African-American woman. And I couldn't find much about her as a person, which I always try to include. So it's always sad when I can't, because I want to share their life story and not just be, like I said before, not just be like they were a victim of so-and-so or whatever.
And that's the unfortunate thing with some of these cases, especially when you get into like serial killers. They tend to focus on this person just being a victim, and then when you go to try to find things beyond that, like their life before, it's hard to find.
Yeah, it's always frustrating. But because I couldn't find a lot about her, no one really knows if it was common for her to disappear for long periods of time, which it could be why she wasn't reported missing at first.
Could be.
She was discovered on June 18th, 2005 by a group of friends hunting for bullfrogs at night, though.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
These stories, and you'll see a pattern here where a lot of the women were found by just regular civilians, even though there were like police search parties for these women.
Yeah.
It still was like civilians who would find them.
Usually civilians who found them.
But that always also like fucks me up. Like I was listening to your case last week when I was editing, and the one that I like didn't even catch, I guess you said her son walked in while she was being attacked.
Yes.
And I was like, how did I not say something? Because that was like, I was listening to it, I was like, oh my god, and then I was just quiet and I was like, what the fuck is that? Like, that was insane. I was like, Jesus Christ. And then there's like the other times where you're like, yeah, and like a child walked up and found her body, and I'm like, oh my god. Not in that case specifically, but we have talked about stuff like that.
Yes.
And it's just like, it always just makes me like feel extra bad, because I can't imagine finding somebody like that.
Oh no. Ooh.
Ooh.
No.
That's the only description we need is ooh. However, Ernestine was partially closed, and her body was found floating in a drainage canal off LA Highway 102. This was a couple miles southeast of Jennings, and it is noted that drugs and alcohol were found in her system, but her case also stands out a lot more because they were able to determine that her throat had been slit.
Okay. You know, they couldn't just rule it out as like an overdose. Like they knew like this was something happened.
Yeah, for sure. As I talk about these victims, and I'll say it a few times, but just as a reminder, many of them were too decomposed to really identify much. So the fact that they were able to tell that her throat had been slit was big. I mean, she was...
Yeah.
It's her and one other victim are the only ones out of the 8 that had any sort of identifiable injury on them. Now, because she was one of the few with a clear cause of death, her case did briefly lead to an arrest of 2 suspects, Brian Chad Jones and Lawrence Nixon. But I'm going to circle back to them. I'm not going to get into them yet.
We're going to put a pin in it.
We're going to put a pin in it. So just try to keep those names in mind, but I'll refresh you when we get there.
Yeah.
Kristen Gary Lopez was 21 years old. She was born on November 27th and was white and stood about 5'2". She was a young mother at the time of her disappearance, and she disappeared nearly 2 years after Ernestine and Loretta. So this is 2 years later than the first 2 victims.
Okay.
She was last seen on March 5th, 2007, but her disappearance was a bit different. By now, Jennings had already had 2 women who were killed and connected to the same vulnerable social network. So they were all all did drugs, all had histories of sex work and things like that. A pattern. So Kristen was also part of that network. But when she vanished, friends would later describe fear in her final days. She was acting nervously, And even a childhood friend of Kristen stated that as they were walking, Kristen kept looking over her shoulder at every single passing car. Her friend said, quote, "I've never seen her that paranoid before. I said, 'Kristen, you can talk to me.' And she said, 'But you're not going to understand,'" end quote.
That almost makes me wonder, like, it wasn't some form of surprise attack. She knew something. She clearly knew something.
Yes. That is my personal opinion about the case as well.
Yeah.
At first, many assumed that she was gone temporarily, as her disappearing for a little bit wasn't too uncommon. She would often go on like a binge and then circle back a few days later, or even sometimes like a week later. But on March 18th, her body was recovered from either the Petit Jean Canal.
We'll go with it.
I think that that's fairly close. Like I said, I'm not good with French words, so I apologize. Or it was in a drainage canal area in Jeff Davis Parish.
Mm-hmm.
In public records indicate that decomposition made the determination of the cause of death difficult once again. Whitney Dubois was a mom. She had a daughter with Alvin, quote, Bootsy Lewis, end quote. That was like a nickname.
A nickname, yeah.
And if that last name sounds familiar, that's because Elvin was Loretta's brother-in-law. So he was the brother-in-law of the first victim.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
So there were family ties between these two victims, and these type of connections become the hallmark of the case. Whitney's family, including her sister and daughter, helped with the 4-part docuseries called Death on the Bayou that Jennings ate. I believe that this was on Hulu.
I think I heard of that. I thought about watching it, but I'm kind of glad I didn't.
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely... There's also another one called Murder on the Bayou. It's either on like Tubi or Hulu, one of those, but you could find it if you're interested in watching it. And while her daughter was 4 at the time of her mother's death, Whitney's sister said that, quote, "She loves her mom dearly and is proud of her no matter what," end quote. Now, Whitney was 26 years old at the time of her death, and she also had a past of drug abuse and sex work. She was last seen on May 10th, 2007 at a house on McKinley Street in Jennings, but her body would be discovered on May 12th, 2007, so only 2 days later.
Okay.
Now, Whitney was a little bit different. So the other women so far have been found in canals and drainage ditches. Mm-hmm. Her body was discovered at the intersection of 2 remote dirt roads outside of Jennings. She was found lying completely nude in the roadway.
Oh, so just completely different from the others.
Completely different. The isolation of the location is what struck the investigators and family, really. It was very weird, and especially because they're looking at the other cases, and they're not... I don't think at this point they're fully piecing them together.
Yeah. Because,
like I said, the first 2 happened, and then it was like 2 years later. So they're definitely like spaced out to where I think at this point they're not fully connecting them, but they still were taken aback by the fact that she was just in the road.
Yeah.
Like just there.
Yeah.
And what's even stranger is that unlike the waterways that had become associated with the earlier victims and could account for some of the advanced decomp,
mm-hmm.
Whitney had been left in the open, and it had only been 2 days since she disappeared. Yet, despite that, investigators still could not determine exactly how she died.
Huh.
Which, at least nothing was released publicly.
Nothing public.
Which is also a pattern here.
Huh.
Mm-hmm. Whitney's cousin stated that Whitney had been beaten so severely that her face wasn't recognizable, and she was actually identified by her fingerprints.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, so the police and the investigators wouldn't release anything.
Disclose anything.
But her cousin said that.
A family member, yeah. And this was during what time period? Like what?
This is 2007.
So, okay.
Yeah, so the first victim was in 2005.
Okay. I'm just making sure I've got the right timeline.
Right. Now, Laconia Brown, whose nickname was Muggy, she was 23 at the time of her death, and she was also a black woman. Which I make note of because there was, out of the 8, there was 3 black women and the rest were all white. So later there's like a theory that I'll talk about, which is why I'm making note of that now. So she would be discovered on May 20th, 2007, only 10 days after Whitney. So we went from a month apart to like 2 years apart, and now we're back to 10 days.
To back now.
Yep. She disappeared after telling her grandmother that she was going to a friend's house that night for gumbo and would be back sometime around midnight.
Oh, I want some gumbo now.
I've never had gumbo.
So my dad doesn't make like exactly authentic like gumbo,
traditional,
but it's technically called chicken bog, but it's very similar, and
that sounds pretty good.
I'll have to see if he'll make some.
I've seen like pictures, like when I'm on Pinterest looking up recipes and pictures that pop up, and I'm like, ooh.
Yeah, I'll have to see if my dad will make some. And
next recording day, you'll be like, here's gumbo.
Oh.
But Muggy did not return home to her grandmother's. Now, like Ernestine, she also was the other one that had her throat slit.
Okay.
And a Jennings police officer actually discovered her body laying on Rocca Road, I believe it's Rocca, which leads to the police firing range.
That's odd.
It is
it's
odd.
A little strange.
A little bit weird. It's a little bit suspicious, if you will.
A little bizarre.
A little bizarre. She was clothed, but had no shoes on, and her body had been doused with bleach.
Whoa. Okay.
Right.
Bleach?
Yes.
I guess my brain is trying to think what would have been the point of using bleach.
So it can degrade some types of evidences.
Okay.
So like biological evidence, it's not like a fix-all.
Yeah.
But it can impede evidence collection and things like that. She was wearing a white tank top, but it had been stained from white to pink, which some sources just said, which is believed to like be blood diluted with some liquid, but I assume that it would be the blood diluted with the bleach that was dumped on her.
Yeah.
Like, that just makes sense.
In my opinion.
Yeah. Now, Muggy's family stated that she may have known something horrible was about to happen to her, and that she was actually living in fear just days prior to her death.
So, like, I just forgot her name.
Yes, so it was the same as Kristen.
Yes.
She was victim number 3.
Number 3. So, exact same thing where she kind of knew something.
Yeah. Muggy's grandmother actually states that Muggy knew the other 4 girls.
Oh!
And she got it into her head that she would be the next victim, which is also incredibly strange.
Ooh. I got a little bit of goosebumps there. I'm not even gonna lie.
Like, that's just haunting.
She knew the other girls.
She knew
Do
the
we
other
know
girls.
how she knew the other girls?
Not, like, explicitly.
Okay.
But a lot of them ran in the same circles.
Okay.
And so, like, I'll get into it a little bit more later, too. Now, one task force witness allegedly stated that Muggy had seen Loretta Lewis's body in the canal before the official discovery.
Oh.
Yes. Though this was a witness reporting, and it's not an established fact.
Yeah.
Now, another layer here is that Muggy told family she was working as an informant on murder investigations, and that she allegedly identified Michael Janice as the officer that she worked with. Now, Janice is the one who found her body.
Oh.
Yes, so she worked directly with Michael Janice as an informant.
Yeah.
Janice is the officer that found her body on the way to the firing range.
My brain goes to 2 different options.
Neither of them are good.
Neither one of them are good. But
yeah, we will circle back to him.
I figured. That's why I'm not going too deep.
Right. They were able to discover more evidence and leads in this case than any of the previous ones because Muggy's body was found about 6 hours after it was left on the road.
Oh, so it was like a shorter time frame.
Yes.
Okay.
I'm not saying that the officer that found her necessarily had anything to do with it. And this is a really kind of fucked up comparison. When I would play Among Us with our friends, and like in the game, sometimes like when you're the imposter, you'll kill somebody and then you report the body to throw off suspicion on yourself.
Yes.
And that's what my brain immediately thought of.
I'm not going to lie to you. That was kind of where my brain went with one of my things.
Yeah, that's what I was like. I'm not saying, and I know that that's kind of a bad comparison to like a video game, but like in my head, that's what I pictured is like somebody kind of trying to throw suspicion off himself by being like, why would I report the body?
Yeah.
But we'll get to all that later. Now, Crystal Shea Zena was a 24-year-old mother, and she had been missing for nearly a year.
Oh!
When her remains were finally discovered on September 11th, 2008, investigators believed that she had been dead long before recovery.
I have a lot of questions.
Yes. I don't know if I have all the answers, but I'll do my best.
No, it's just the time frames are all different from each other, and
they're very weird.
It's bizarre.
Mm-hmm. Her mother wrote in her obituary how she enjoyed fishing, singing, music, and spending time with her family, and that she was, quote, a people person and enjoyed spending time with her family and friends, end quote. Crystal's cousin, Sarah Benoit, stated that Crystal was a good person. She always wanted to be a mother. And whenever she finally had her daughter, she said, quote, she thought her life was complete, but then the drugs got her again. Sarah Benoit also pointed out that all the girls knew one another, saying, quote, they all got high together, they all hung out together, they all ran together, end quote. And just before Crystal's death, she also admitted to her cousin that she had been selling illegal drugs for a local dealer in town.
Okay. All right.
Crystal was reportedly found by hunters around 3 p.m. Her body was discovered in a wooded area south of Jennings, near LaCour Road, off Louisiana Highway 1126. Some sources also describe the location as near a ditch or a dry canal area.
Okay.
But unfortunately, because it had been so long between her death and discovery, the cause of death could not be determined because decomp completely erased any answers that we could have found.
I gotcha.
And there's also no, widely verified description of if her clothing was still there in any capacity, or if, because some materials do decompose, some don't.
Yeah.
There's nothing that I could confirm. Now, Crystal had a roommate named Brittany Gary.
Okay.
Brittany Gary is our 7th victim.
Oh! Okay!
I'm not laughing. I'm laughing at her reaction and the ponytail shake when you said that. Now, Brittany Gary was only 17 years old.
Oh my gosh.
Mm-hmm. Her death obviously shook Jennings because it also kind of shattered the public narrative that was going on. Up until this point, it kind of fallen in that typical story of... It has kind of fallen into that typical story that we've talked about, like we said, where people didn't really care like they should have because the victims were seen as less than. They had a high-risk lifestyle, in quotes, which realistically just makes it easier for people to brush it off. But when you have a 17-year-old, and it was our youngest victim,
a teenager, it forced Jennings to confront something. It wasn't just a bad choice in life, in quotes, once again. Now, Brittany was last seen alive making a purchase at a Family Dollar store around 5:30 p.m. on Sunday, November 2nd, 2008. And while the trip should have only taken her 30 minutes, when Brittany didn't return home, her mother, Teresa Gary, started calling her. And when she got no answer, she knew something was wrong because that was totally out of character for Brittany to do. All right.
Her mom and friends started putting up missing person flyers and pleaded for her daughter's safe return. But on November 15, 2008, Brittany's body was found during organized search efforts after she was officially reported missing. She was found in a rural area near Jennings. Now, still by the time she was found, it was reported that her body showed advanced decomp, which resulted in limited findings, and the cause of death was once again undetermined. Now, Brittany's last name also might sound familiar because she was the cousin of Kristen Gary Lopez, our 3rd victim.
Okay.
And Brittany was also reported as being good friends with Muggy Brown.
It's all connected.
It's all connected.
It's all connected.
And Brittany's mom worked with Ernestine, our second victim, at Wendy's.
Just like I just said, it's all connected in some shape or form.
Very weird. Like, now, her working at Wendy's, I couldn't find a ton of support for it, but I did see it in a couple places. So still, by the time Brittany died, Jennings was no longer looking at an isolated tragedy. It was a web that was becoming impossible to ignore.
Yes.
Nicole Jean Guillory was the last woman publicly associated with the Jennings 8 timeline.
Oh no.
Many people consider her death to be one of the most haunting because it happened after years of attention, theories, and even an active task force that was put into place to try to solve the crimes. Nicole was born on August 28th, 1982, and her mother remembers her last years, saying that, quote, Nicole was a good girl in her own way. She's gotten mixed up with the wrong people and the wrong crowd. I don't know when it went bad, end quote. She was last seen on August 16, 2009, and her body was discovered on August 19, 2009, near Interstate 10 outside of Jennings in the neighboring Acadia Parish. Now, it was technically slightly outside of where we were originally looking, but it's still very close.
Yeah.
And also, once again, she was found 3 days after she was last seen. But she was found partially clothed, but again with advanced decomposition present, and so the cause of death was once again not publicly determined in any way.
I don't know. My brain is like trying to understand, because it's such a short span of time, as to why they would have such advanced decomp, but at the same time I'm also thinking it's Louisiana, the humidity probably has a factor into that, I'm sure, you know.
Right. I actually do get into that in a little bit, but since you brought it up, by the time the investigators began piecing them all together, a lot of the answers that they would need had begun to disappear because Louisiana's heat, humidity, water systems, and slightly delayed recoveries can alter evidence. Because that was my exact question. I was like, how is some of these like a 3-day span?
Yes.
And it's like they couldn't even determine the cause of death. I still think it's weird. Like, I'm still gonna say it's a little weird. But to give them a little bit of like leeway, typical summer conditions in Louisiana, you can find temperatures from like the upper 80s to 90s. There's a lot of high humidity and active insects, which can do damage. So in those 72 hours, the investigators may have already seen like bloating, skin slippage, insect activity, swelling, and facial changes that can affect the appearance and more. And then on top of that, some of them were also found in water. And
which that has its own factors into what that does to a body.
Now, sometimes it slows the insect like access to it initially, but it causes more skin changes, it creates bloating, and in warmer temperatures, it can accelerate deterioration. And then you also have to think of like scavengers, like fishes and things like that, might feed on the bodies. And the term advanced decomp itself is really broad, and it doesn't mean like skeletonization necessarily. It just means that it's decomposed enough to complicate evidence.
Yeah.
But like I said, I still think it's a little weird that like so many of them nothing could be found on them.
Yeah.
Only 2 of them had an identifiable cause of death.
Yeah.
Just a little weird.
A little strange.
A little strange. Especially because Muggy, who was found 6 hours after her death, they were like, we don't know how she died. I was like, are you sure about that?
Are you sure about that?
Now, also, Nicole, too, had been feeling like something was going to happen to her. Nicole's mother said that shortly before her daughter had disappeared, she had asked her what kind of icing she wanted for her birthday cake. Because remember, so she was last seen on August 16th, and her birthday was August 28th. So it was just a couple days before her birthday.
Not far from.
Right. So when her mom asked her what kind of icing she wanted, It's stated that Nicole said, quote, "Mama, it doesn't matter. I'm not going to be here to see my birthday." Which makes me want to cry.
Yeah. Yeah, that's heartbreaking.
Yeah. She died 9 days before turning 27. She allegedly expressed other fears regarding earlier deaths and that she believed the police were somehow involved in them. And she became the final woman associated with the Jennings 8 timeline. I have a tear in my eye from reading that one tag. Many of the women lived difficult and unstable lives shaped by addiction, poverty, transient housing, and periods of disappearing from public view. Their absences were not always immediately recognized as emergencies because, for some of the families and friends, temporary disappearances had happened before. Some families did search immediately while others waited and kind of hoped that the women would come home.
Yeah, that they would show up.
I don't blame them because it was a pattern
if
that
it was
they had
normal,
seen. Exactly. A lot of the times the concern would slowly turn to fear as days passed without contact. And by the time search efforts began, time had already moved forward.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said, it was even kind of weirder because the first people to find these women were often not the investigators conducting these organized searches.
Yeah.
But they were fishermen, bullfrog hunters, and everyday residents.
Let's say civilians.
Civilians, yeah. Now, in the investigation process, after facing public pressure, Sheriff Ricky Edwards announced the formation of a multi-agency task force in December of 2008. So we're jumping back a little bit because this is before Nicole.
Yeah.
Now, Ricky Edwards was the sheriff of Jefferson Davis Parish from 1992 to 2012 and was in office during all of the 8 murders. And he did face a lot of criticism after publicly saying that the victims had been living a high-risk lifestyle, which is gross. Now, the task force was made up of local, state, and federal authorities to try and solve the open cases. It was 14 agencies in total and included local authorities, state police, federal partners, and even FBI participation. Case files were thousands of pages long and included hundreds of interviews. Multiple suspects were examined, but ultimately it led to no final offender being identified.
I hate that.
Yes. The fall after Nicole was killed, Sheriff Edwards publicly acknowledged what many had long suspected, that the deaths were likely the work of a common offender. The task force more than doubled the reward for information leading to the killer. So now this transformed the fear that was happening in Jennings, because residents no longer believed they were watching isolated crimes. They thought it was a serial killer. The FBI itself has a few criteria to define a serial killer. And one of those is that there has to be a minimum of 3 kills, which we do have here.
Oh, for sure.
And another is that there has to be a time gap between kills so it can be shown that it wasn't several killings during a fit of rage.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, it's not just like somebody getting mad at their coworkers and going and killing 3 or more people. There has to be like a pattern of gaps.
What is a time between?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Makes sense.
Which we also have here.
We do.
So when you first kind of look at the deaths of the Jennings 8 women, it does have some support for being the work of a serial killer, such as the geographic clustering, which refers to the area in which a serial killer finds victims, commits their crimes, or disposes of the bodies. The Jennings 8 not only were from a localized area, but all 8 women were recovered in or around the Jennings/Jeff Davis Parish area. They were in canals, ditches, rural roads, and isolated locations. And even most of the recovery sites were relatively close geographically, so it does support the serial killer theory. Victims also shared multiple characteristics, so serial killers often target people that share features which make them their ideal victims.
A victim profile.
A victim profile. And we do kind of have one. They were all female, ages 17 to 30. They shared similar life backgrounds like addiction histories, poverty, sex work involvement, and even had overlapping social circles. So at first glance, you can kind of be like, all right, 8 women, 1 town, canals and ditches, bodies appearing over the years. However, many pointed out why this doesn't seem likely, and this is where we get even into more of the complicatedness that's going on. One, like I said, even with that victim profile, there were differences. Like, to have, I'm not categorizing all serial killers to follow the same statistics, but there were different races. There was a fairly larger age gap range, like 17 to 30.
Yeah.
Which isn't unheard of, but not as common. But one of the bigger things, too, is that all the victims knew each other.
They knew each other. And that's really, I think, more of a defining factor. Because usually, like, serial killers usually don't pick people that
know each
other, usually.
I literally have that written down.
Yeah.
Many serial killers target strangers. They won't target somebody who knows themselves, but especially who would know each other.
Like the victims knowing each other.
Exactly. Yeah. And investigative journalist Ethan Brown, he was a reporter who spent years investigating these murders. And I reference his stuff a lot because he dug deep and he interviewed so many people, and he doesn't even share all of his sources because he says that, like, it could put their lives in danger and things like that.
Yeah, of course.
But he pointed out that this was one of the strongest arguments against it because some of the victims not only just knew each other, some were relatives, some lived together, all of their social networks overlapped. And once again, that's just not a serial killer thing.
Usually not.
Also, the causes of death varied, so we only have 2 clearly documented throat wounds, and then we can kind of assume that there was the one beating, based on what the cousin said. But most of the other bodies were too decomposed for definitive causes of death, but some suspected causes included possible asphyxia. But that's uncertain.
No, we don't know. Yeah.
And serial killers usually show repeated methods to kill their victims.
Yes.
Now, there was also a missing sexual assault pattern. This was probably due to the lack of evidence, but it did weaken classic serial predator arguments because very often serial killings against women do involve sexual assault.
Yes. Which, if you kind of look at where I've talked about some of the serial killers in Baton Rouge, you see that.
Right. We can't for sure say, though, that there wasn't any.
Yeah.
Because we don't know because of the the supposed state that the bodies were in.
Yeah.
Even within what evidence could be found, there was a lack of a clear signature. And then there's the timeline problems, because if we look at a typical classic serial killer progression, the time between kills usually decreases as we move along because the cooling off periods get shorter. And I mean, basically it's the serial killer's satisfaction not lasting as long.
Yes.
The Jennings 8 case, it's very erratic.
Oh, it's
crazy.
From one extreme to the other.
Yeah, between the first and second victim, it was a span of 29 days. Between the second and third, it was almost 2 years. Between the 4th and 5th, there was a 4-day gap. And then between the 5th and 6th, there was a 543-day gap.
Yeah.
Like, that's erratic. That challenges all, like, classic serial killer progression.
Yes.
So once again, I say classic because I know some, like, I believe it's the BTK killer. He took, like, 8 years off. So, like, I get it. It does happen.
Yes.
But we're talking about the average here.
The norm.
The norm. And these counterpoints would later lead to the argument that the murders looked less like a serial killer and more like interconnected local violence. These women were not strangers, like we've been saying. Their lives intersected long before their deaths, and private investigator Kirk Menard was hired by the families of several victims after local police came up empty trying to solve the cases.
Okay.
While law enforcement still pursues the theory that the cases are from a serial killer, Menard quickly dismisses the idea, saying, quote, "I think we have more than one killer here. All the victims knew each other, they all ran in the same circles. all of the same names keep popping up. I think there are multiple people involved, end quote.
And that also just brings up another point. If it was a serial killer, we would still be, I think, technically finding people.
Right.
In connection of these women.
Or like even if he had moved onto a different location or something, there would be similar patterns and things that would eventually be connected.
Yes, but we don't.
We don't. Now, Ethan Brown repeatedly stated that possibly all of the victims had provided information to police regarding local drug activity. So they all acted as informants to the police. And this became one of the strongest links between them, because they were feeding information to police while moving inside the same drug networks that they were trying to expose, which creates a risk as well.
That becomes a very dangerous situation.
Very dangerous situation. So that's when fear started to spread and people started to ask if these women were victims because of what they knew or because of who they knew.
That to me seems the most likely.
That's what I was picking up on too, for sure. Now, if you remember Muggy Brown, she reportedly told relatives that she was acting as an informant in the murder investigations before her death, and that's when she identified Michael Jennings, or Janice. Michael, otherwise known as Mike Janice, was a Jennings Police Department officer / lieutenant whose name became a part of the Jennings story because of him being an informant. Years after the Jennings 8 investigation, he became involved in an internal department controversy unrelated to the murders and was reportedly fired after allegations involving failure to conduct sobriety procedures during another officer's crash investigation.
Oh.
And that's just a drop in the corruption in the police department that we're going to get into.
Oh, yay!
Yay! If you remember Sheriff Edwards, he was the one that claimed that they all had high-risk lifestyles.
Yes.
Before he was in the department, Sheriff Cormier controlled the Jefferson Davis Parish from 1980 to 1992. He was fined and forced to step down in 1992 due to a federal indictment for misuse of funds and prison labor.
Oh!
And Ethan Brown points out that the corruption among local and state law enforcement in the region has been long established before these deaths.
Okay.
During Sheriff Edwards' time, drug interdiction and increased random searches along the I-10 corridor did yield more successful drug seizures, but those drugs were just as quickly put back onto the streets by local law enforcement in exchange for cash, information, and sex.
I have my theories, but I don't know that I can state those theories for the sake of protecting ourselves.
See your theories. I can always cut them out if they're bad.
I know. I was. It seems like maybe within the law enforcement there was some form of drug trafficking ring that they were involved in, or
Oh, girl, we're not cutting that out because I literally state that later on.
Talking about it. I'll just let you continue, and we'll just talk about it then. How about that?
Yeah,
We'll just let you continue.
Before I get to that, though, we do have to talk about Leonard Barry Crochet.
All right.
So he was a local drug dealer who was shot and killed in April of 2005 by a probation and parole agent, John Briggs Beckton, during a raid.
Okay.
Harvey Bird Dog was his nickname. Burley, another Jennings prescription dealer who operated just blocks from Frankie Richards' South Jennings home, is the home that they raided. So they raided Burley's home. And that is when Agent Beckton stated that Crochet moved to his waistline/belt, and he feared that he was reaching for a weapon. So Agent Beckton fired a shotgun round.
Okay.
Later investigation reportedly found that there was no weapon located near Crochet, and no evidence that he even displayed a weapon. And witnesses even said that they did not see a weapon on him at all.
Oh.
One of the long-running community theories was that some of the victims may have witnessed the shooting or known details about it. And Ethan Brown reported that during his investigation, people reportedly told him that all or most of the women had been present or connected to the event in some fashion.
Oh, okay.
The police then had been tipped off by another associate of Burleigh's, who later claimed that Crochet had refused to traffic Jennings' police department's drugs. So the theory is that they killed him because he refused to traffic their drugs for them.
Okay.
And at least one of the witnesses to Crochet's killings was for sure Kristen Gary Lopez, who was also one of Frankie Richards' sex workers. Now, she was victim 3, just in case you don't remember.
I smell a cover-up.
Dude, it gets so fucking messy in this bitch.
No.
It gets so messy. Now, this theory that it is some sort of cover-up for this event is also supported because many of the women were terrified the few days leading up to their deaths. Even if it wasn't directly from Crochet, it does seem like they knew something about something.
Yes, they knew something that they shouldn't have known.
Yes. This also kind of goes to Nicole's statements about the police being connected to some of the deaths before she died.
Oh, here we go.
Also within that, though, is that one witness told investigators that before Nicole died, she believed she also might be the next victim. But this tip allegedly received no follow-up.
Ah.
And this is where I'm going to wrap up for part 1.
Oh my goodness. What a cliffhanger you're leaving us on. Wow.
It's a lot, man. And like it's a lot of names.
It's a lot of names.
So it gets confusing pretty fast.
Yeah.
So I try to separate it kind of mostly of like the victims themselves and like the main possible police corruption story.
Mm-hmm.
And then the next part, we're just continuing to talk about police corruption, basically.
Okay.
So yeah.
Right.
So keep an ear out for that. That'll be coming out this Thursday.
Yes, Thursday. Well, thank you so much for listening, guys. And don't go too far because we'll catch you in the next investigation. Bye.
Bye.